Miss Carrie here from Miss Carrie's Creations. I want to welcome you to the Winter on Main Street collection YouTube Hop. I'm joining an amazing group of talented creators today to share some great cards and projects made with this new collection from Catherine Pooler Designs. Here on my desk I have those new metallic inks in silver, champagne, and gold, along with the warm and bright stamp set, dots and scallop frame, and the Bedford Falls paper collection. All of these items and others will be featured in today's Winter on Main Street collection YouTube Hop. In celebration of this collection, you will have a chance to win a $100 Catherine Pooler Design gift certificate. Here in a moment, I'll share how you could possibly win that amazing prize. I'm going to share 2 card making projects with you using these supplies. As I create the projects, I'll bring in a few additional items, and I'll list those in the description below, along with a link to the new metallic ink collection. Here are a few of the items I'll be using. I have cut a piece of this lovely plaid pattern from the Bedford Falls paper pack using this larger dots frame. Not only does it cut out the rectangle piece, it also leaves a nice dotted edge that looks a lot like stitching. I've also cut out a 1/4 inch piece of the red pattern and this slate and white snowfall. This was cut a little bit wider than a 1/4 inch. For the first card, I'm going to start by creating a random stamped pattern strip with some of the smaller images on that warm and bright stamp set. I'm all about saving time, so I'm placing 2 of the stamps on one block and 1 on the other. I'm using silver metallic ink and On the Lake dye ink. I'm going to start with the silver pigment ink. Pigment ink is different than the dye ink you might be used to. If I run my finger over the stamped image, it is going to smear. These new metallic inks are slow drying pigment inks that float on the surface of your paper. The pigment rises to the top, making these inks more vibrant, but they also take a while to dry. The paper I'm using is rather porous and the ink is soaking in some, but it's still not going to dry completely. Pigment ink can be difficult to use if you're trying it for the first time. It tends to slide some as you stamp, and pressing too hard can cause the ink to expand past the image. Even after using this ink and other pigment inks for years, I'm still making a few mistakes here. That's why I cut a much larger strip than needed so that I could select the best portion for my card. Now I have been stamping for about 15 minutes and this pigment ink is still wet. It is suggested that you use a fixative spray, but I could not find one at our local craft store, so I'm going to heat emboss this. I just sprinkled some clear embossing powder over the ink, remove the excess, and then I'm going to heat this with a heat tool. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and then I'll show you how to assemble the card. I don't own any cardstock that matches the colors in the Bedford Falls paper pack, so I'm going to create my own. Catherine Pooler inks are super saturated, and they create a really nice coloring right on top of your cardstock. I'm also going to do this with the gold metallic ink. This is much stickier and a little difficult to do, but it turns out great and I can use it to cut out a few leaves. Before we start assembling the card, I do need to stamp a few more images for the design. The warm and bright stamp set has 3 lantern images and a few accessory pieces. There are 3 candles, a flame, 2 sentiments, and some little foliage bits like the ones I use for the random stamping. All of these images have matching dies, so I'm going to use those to cut these out. I'm also going to bring in some holly leaf dies to cut out some of that gold metallic cardstock. I'm going to stamp a few more images off camera so that we can start putting the card together. I have placed the plaid pattern onto the center of a card base, and I'm going to bring in that randomly stamped cardstock. I used the dots rectangle die to cut this out so that it had the same dot pattern as that plaid paper along the edges. I'm adhering the 2 pattern strips along the sides, and then I'll bring in the sentiment that I stamped with peppermint scrub ink. Both the sentiment and the peppermint scrub cardstock I created were cut using the dots and scallop frame set. I like how all those frames can be nested within each other. Each of the lantern dies in the collection cut out the windows. Since I wanted to layer this lantern over pattern paper, I placed that window cut back into the lantern and used foam tape to hold it in place. I placed my candle and frame pieces there in the center, and now we have a cute little lantern. At the top, I'm going to add those gold leaves that I cut with the holly dies from the cardstock that was colored using that gold metallic ink. To finish the card, I'm going to bring in these lovely sequins and add those off camera so that we can start working on our second card. Before I share the second card with you, I want to tell you how you can enter to win that $100 Catherine Pooler Designs gift certificate. To enter to win, you will need to subscribe and leave a comment along all the hop stops. You will need to subscribe and comment before midnight Eastern Standard Time, October 31st. The winner will be announced on the Catherine Pooler blog and Instagram on November 1st. All right, now that you know how to enter to win that $100 Catherine Pooler Design gift certificate, let's move on to the second card. This is going to be a faux shaker. I'm not going to add acetate or moving pieces, which is going to create a thinner card that's easier to mail. I cut out 2 pieces of white cardstock using this larger dot frame. To create the window, I placed a smaller dot frame in the center. Inside the window, I want to add 2 lanterns from the Warm and Bright stamp set. I am stamping these with the new Champagne Metallic ink. When I'm finished with these, I'm going to set the ink with clear embossing powder, and then I'll cut them out with the matching dies. I'm also going to stamp my sentiment with Merlot ink. Before I laid the background cardstock on the platform, I used a pencil to mark where the frame sat so that I could position the stamp in the right spot. For this design, we have 2 white rectangles for the shaker, 2 champagne lanterns, and some leaves that I cut from the peppermint scrub cardstock that we used on the previous card. Instead of adding a candle in the lanterns, I'm going to attach some vellum to the back and make it look like frosted glass. Now there's no way to cut these with dies, so I'm going to fussy cut them from the vellum. I'm going to adhere this vellum to the back of the lantern and trim it down as close to the windows as I can so that I don't have too much to cut. It's actually not too difficult because they are just straight lines and a small curve. Now, if you wanted to be more precise, you could trace the lanterns with a pencil on the vellum, then cut that traced image out a little smaller and adhere it in place. Before we add our frame and other elements, I want to bring in a little bit of snow to that background. As I randomly stamp these little dots, I'm going to rotate my stamp, overlap other images, and create visual triangles with the design. I'm using the On the Lake ink, but there are some other lovely colors in the Catherine Pooler collection that you could use. The silver metallic ink would also be an awesome choice for the snow background. I plan to place the lanterns inside the frame. This one is going to sit right here, and the other one's going to sit over here. Before I adhere them in place, I'm going to bring in a little bit of whipped honey to create some glow. Catherine Pooler has some lovely saturated ink pads. I want this glow to be soft and subtle, so I'm going to brush off some of the ink before I add it to the background. As I add the ink, I'm bringing back the lanterns to make sure I have enough of this glow around the image. For this application, I am using a blending brush to create that softer pattern. If you don't have a blending brush, you could also use a sponge dauber or a small foam blender. I'm going to adhere the frame to my background piece. I am going to use a very thin foam tape that will give this a little dimension without making it too thick to mail. My original plan was to tuck these under the frame, but I like the dimension of overlapping the frame a bit. As I adhere these in place, you can see that awesome effect the vellum window creates with the snow in the background and that soft glow in the center. I just love the way this looks. Near the smaller lantern, I'm going to bring in those holly leaves. When I first added them to the card, they were a bit one-dimensional. Catherine Pooler ink is water reactive, so I spritzed these with some water to give them a little texture. I'm going to lay this faux shaker frame onto this lovely slate pattern from the Bedford Falls collection. I love how this color just makes those elements pop. The last part of the project is to add the sequins, which makes this look like a shaker. To save a little time, I laid the pieces out off camera so that I could share with you where they sit as I glue them down. Just like a true shaker card, these sequins are placed randomly within the frame. I also like to tuck a few behind the frame and under the lanterns to make it look like shaker pieces that fell in place. If you look closely, you will also be able to see that many are in visual triangle formation and are bundled in odd numbers. I also overlapped a few, just like elements would sit inside a shaker window. Here are the two cards we created today using those new metallic inks from Catherine Pooler. The first card has a playful feel with the random silver stamping, plaid pattern paper, and a simple lantern with gold metallic leaves. The second card is a simple faux shaker with two metallic champagne lanterns. These have vellum windows with a little bit of glow underneath and some randomly placed sequins that makes it look like a shaker card. Both cards that we created today use those new metallic inks from Catherine Pooler, along with the new Winter on Main Street collection. The designs are simple to make with beautiful details, and I can't wait to share these during the holidays. I hope all the projects shared today in the Winter on Main Street collection YouTube hop inspire you. Don't forget to leave a comment on all of the hop stops and subscribe to every channel. This enters you into the contest to win that $100 gift certificate to the Catherine Pooler shop. In the description below, I'll place a link to the creator on the next stop. I want to thank you for joining me for another card making project. If you would like to see more of my creations, you can visit my channel or follow Miss Carrie's Creations online. If you have any questions about this project or the supplies listed below, feel free to leave me a comment. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.